Hi, my name is Antos, and today I wanted to talk about the Sony A7S camera. And not only am I going to sort of talk about the good and the bad things about the camera, but also I wanted to answer probably the number one question I've been getting lately is whether I should buy the Panasonic A7S or the GH4. So I thought I would sort of talk about not just investing into whether it's in this camera, but just investing in cameras in general for your film production or video production business. So right off the bat, the first number one really sort of amazing thing about this camera is its low light sensitivity. It seems like everybody's talking about it out there, and then when I had a chance to finally try out the camera myself, just like everybody else, I was really just blown away by how well it performs in low light. Now, as cool as this function is, I'm not sure if this is really a function that's going to be widely used really out there in film production. Probably if you're doing documentaries or wedding videos, then that function will come in really handy. I myself have not actually even had a chance really to test out this camera in a real production environment, so I can't say either way whether the low light capability is really something that's going to help me as a filmmaker. For sure, it opens up a lot of sort of right away ideas in my head about just being able to light scenes using even little flashlight and little LED lights, things like that. But again, I have not tried it in a real production environment, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But just having used this camera sort of like my little camping trips here and there, and being able to, for example, shoot beautiful view of the stars, just hand holding this camera, it's just it blew my mind. So if you're wondering whether the low light capabilities of this camera are just sort of the hype that everybody's talking about there, I myself have been really sort of blown away by its low light capabilities. Like I said, I've heard about it before from other people, but until I think you've tried it out yourself, you really don't know just how good this camera performs in low light and how clean the images look. You can go up to ISO even like 20 something thousand, and the noise is still usable and I think in a real video production. Another thing that I really like about the camera is the sensor size, and not so much that it's a full frame sensor, because aside from getting the sort of occasional wide angle shots or the really narrow depth of field, it's cool to have that option. But I'm a big fan of shooting in APS-C or sort of something close to a super 35mm image sensor, which is sort of the standard for motion pictures. And what's cool about this camera is that you get both of those. You can very easily switch between a full frame sensor and then sort of crop into an APS-C size image sensor. So what that also means is that, for example, when I was using this camera, sort of doing some tests, on my trip to Rome, Italy, I kind of, I didn't feel like taking a lot of lenses with me. So a lot of times I would just take this Rokinon 24mm lens, and and it's a nice sort of a wide angle lens on a full frame sensor. But then I was able to, like I said, quickly switch to an APS-C size sensor and get sort of this almost like a medium looking shot. So it was really cool because, like I said, without having a zoom lens, I was still able to sort of I guess zoom in and out, depending on the situation. Another thing that's good about having the ability to shoot an APS-C size sensor on this camera is the fact that a lot of the lenses out there are, especially a lot of, like, for example, lenses that are meant for film work, they're not going to cover a full frame sensor because they've been designed for a super 35mm sensor. So that's a really cool thing, is that now you can use this camera with both full frame lenses and APS-C size lenses. This camera also has amazing image latitude. There's sort of the range that it can capture from dark to bright areas. I actually haven't really been using this camera in picture profile 7 or what's commonly referred to as S-Log2. That will give you the widest image latitude, and it is it's a great option to have and a camera, for example, at this price range. The only sort of problem that I found, for me at least, is that simply because I've been testing this camera sort of on my sort of personal trips and things like that, not on a real working production setting. I did not want to sort of build up the camera, and I did not feel like adding a big matte box. The problem with that is that I was not able to put in basically a lot of ND filters, and the limiting thing about the S-Log2 with this camera is the fact that the ISO, the lowest ISO setting that you can use with it is 3200, which simply means that if you're shooting outside, in daylight or even on a cloudy day, you're going to need a lot of ND filters, like at least 10 f-stops basically, of ND filters. So The most variable ND filters are not going to do the job for you. So you're pretty much going to need sort of like these 4x4 ND filters that you put in a matte box. That means you got to have a bigger rig and all that stuff. So it's very limiting in that sense. But definitely if you can figure out an economical way to put in a lot of ND filters in front of your lenses without degrading also the image quality, and also without sort of hindering your workflow with the camera, then I think S-Log for sure is going to give you just a little bit more of an extended image latitude. Now all the examples you're going to see from me that I've been shooting with this is actually in picture profile 3. And and even in that picture profile, the camera performs really, really well. Now, if you're not an experienced colorist, then I would definitely advise that you do not shoot an S-Log2, because that is going to produce, like I said, the flattest looking image, which gives you the most latitude, but also it produces an image that really requires really skillful color grading skills in post. Because if you think that you can just take that image and just simply bump up the contrast and the saturation and you're going to get a great looking image, then if you actually test that out along, for example, like shooting, let's say in picture profile 3, you're going to see that you're actually losing a lot of information. This camera is supposed to it's been marketed as a 4K camera, but when you get the camera, you will only be able to shoot 1080p video. To get 4K video out of this camera, you will have to connect external a 4K recorder via the micro HDMI connection here. And unfortunately, right now there is no recorder out there. I know that the Antos Shogun is promised to come out soon, but it's already gotten delayed sort of to end of October, early November. Hopefully it doesn't get delayed any further. So that is sort of the one thing I would say the drawback, when comparing this to the GH4, is that GH4, given especially the fact that it's priced, for so much lower, it allows you internally, right into your SD cards to record, beautiful looking 4K video. This camera does not, let you do that. Now, the 1080p video that it produces is amazing. So, if you're just looking for really good, HD video with the possibility of upgrading to 4K, then I think it's still, a great camera option. But if you need 4K right now, then unfortunately this camera, it sort of loses out over the Panasonic GH4. Now, another thing I don't like about this camera is the slow motion, or sort of lack of slow motion in it. And that's not to say that, like, for example, if you're going from the Canon 5D Mark III, for example, or pretty much any other Canon DSLR out there, that it's not a good upgrade, because it is still going to deliver nicer looking slow motion. It can shoot up to 60 frames per second in 1080p, and that looks really nice and clean. But when you're comparing it again to the Panasonic GH4, it cannot go as high. It can actually record, the Panasonic GH4 goes up to 96 frames per second. This technically can go to 120 frames per second, but that's in a scaled down, 1280 by 720, resolution. And not only that, but at that resolution, it also introduces a lot of more instead of little artifacts. So I would really advise not shooting slow motion, basically, or 120 frames in this camera. But 60p looks beautiful on this. Again, it's only going to be a 1080p. Also, I'm not a biggest fan of sort of just the design and the layout, sort of all these buttons, and just just the overall how the camera feels in my hands. It is what's cool about it is that it is smaller and a little bit lighter than the GH4. But at the same time, like I said, it's cool that it's a smaller camera. So definitely, if you can put a small lens on there, it's it's great if you sort of want to hang off your neck and take it, for your vacation or something. But if you're working in a real sort of production environment, let's say you want to put some heavy lenses like these Cine lenses I have up here, then this little flimsy body I find is not the best. For example, when doing even the using these lenses with the A7S. And using it with wireless follow focus, I found that the whole camera was basically just kind of moving up and down. And when you watch my, Sena wireless, follow focus video review, you're going to notice in there that the camera sort of moves a little bit, and that actually is because of this mount here on the bottom. As you can see, when you take away the LCD, it is a very thin body. So when you basically, attach this to the bottom of your tripod, there's not much of a surface area to sort of keep it from moving, sort of back and forth this way. It does not really move left and right, because up here it is pretty wide, but just here it's very narrow. So in a way, I almost wish that the bottom of the camera was a bit wider, it would just make it a bit more stable when attaching it to to a tripod. Also, I just found handling the camera, because it is such a small body, and especially this grip is so small, it's sort of a little bit more awkward. The position of the record button is in a really weird sort of place. Again, very uncomfortable to get to. So just some of those things. Now I understand, because they try to really sort of keep this camera really small and light. There wasn't many options, I guess, to where to put those buttons, so that's very limiting. The last sort of negative thing about the camera is the rolling shutter effect that it produces. Now, it's not as bad as I've been hearing some people out there talking about. I've actually had a chance to use this in in mainly handheld situations while I was walking around in Rome, and I was getting a lot of these, like I said, handheld shots where the camera was shaking, and it wasn't really that evident in there. But definitely, if you're gonna have any kind of scenes with a lot of vertical sort of lines, even for example, when you put this camera on a tripod and you just have some cars drive by, you're gonna see the rolling shutter effect. So just something to keep in mind, when you're working with this camera. Definitely, like I said, if you, for example, panning left and right, and you have a lot of, like here, for example, a lot of trees and things like that, you're gonna see the effect of it. But it's not something that's like, that's so evident that it just completely ruins the image quality. Now, like some people out there have said, when you're shooting in NPS-C size, crop sensor mode, which is actually what I prefer shooting in anyways, then that effect is a lot less sort of noticeable. So again, I would say that's one workaround if you're trying to to do a lot of handheld stuff. Overall, I'm really happy with this camera. I think the image quality that it produces, is really nice. The HD video, hopefully the 4K, once I have a chance to test it out, is going to be just as good. I definitely like the low light sensitivity of this camera. Again, opens up a whole world of possibilities of shooting in low light. Great functions. But if you were to ask me if you should buy this camera, as sort of my advice, well, to answer that question, I would say it's a little bit more complicated than just me saying yes or no. And the reason is because it really depends on on sort of where you are in your career, and also maybe what kind of equipment already you may have. If you don't own any cameras and you're just literally starting out, then I would say this camera, just like the Panasonic GH4, is probably too much for you. Again, those cameras are over $1,000, and yes, they offer a lot of great functions. But again, if you're starting out, trust me, you're not going to need a lot of these functions that these cameras talk about. So what I would suggest to you is get like a used Sony NEX5R out there. I don't know, find it, or Canon T2i or T3i that records HD video, and just get something like used, really cheap out there. You can find some of these cameras that I mentioned for like $200 out there on eBay used. And then buy like some decent lenses for it and start there, because I think getting into a camera like this, and this one retails for $2,500, it's definitely not it's not a purchase that most people can just make without thinking. So so that's sort of my advice, I would say, if you're starting out. Now, if you're if you already have a production company and if you're shooting a lot, maybe let's say you have the 5D Mark III. Is this going to be a huge improvement over the 5D Mark III? Right now, as it is in the camera, no, it's not going to be that great. I mean, it's going to give you the low light sensitivity, and it's going to give you the 60p slow motion. But like I said, the 4K is still not, it's because it's not internally in the camera, so you're not really going to upgrade there. The 1080p footage with this camera, it is better than what 5D Mark III is going to deliver, but again, it's not that much better that I would say that it warrants you spending again another $2,500 on it. Not only that, but then in order for you to use all your Canon glass, you're going to need to buy an active, lens adapter. Good thing about this camera is that it uses the NEX, E-mount, and so it's very easy to adapt pretty much any lens out there. There's adapters for pretty much any lens out there, so that's a good thing with it. But like I said, the active, lens adapters are going to cost you a little bit of money. So that's one thing. Now, if you're, for example, let's say you have the money to burn, and you're gonna upgrade regardless, you're not sure whether to get this or the Panasonic GH4, I think still that the Panasonic GH4, just at this moment right now, is still just a little bit better. And again, that's my own personal opinion. Probably the reason why I think that way is because I had the chance to first test out the Panasonic GH4. And I sort of tested out, and then I actually had a chance to use it in a real production sort of environment. Versus this camera, I haven't had a chance to use it in a real music video or film shoot yet. And just like with any camera, I'm not a fan of just taking it out there without properly testing it and just sort of using it in a paid project. So like I said, so maybe once I have a chance to really use, especially these low light capabilities on some paid job with this, then maybe my opinion will change. Definitely, once I have a chance to try this out, to get the 4K out of this camera with the Atomos 4K recorder, again, that might again sway my opinion. But I think the GH4 overall is it's a lot cheaper than this camera. It produces, gives you nicer slow motion. It has a lot more sort of real video functions out there. It pretty much, like I said, it has everything. It has internal 4K, all those things. Really, the only thing that maybe I would say that this camera sort of has a slight advantage over the GH4 is the low light capabilities. But again, I just, I don't know if it's something I'm really going to be using that much. So that's why I would recommend getting the GH4. Now, if you can, best case scenario, I would say get this and the GH4, and then later on when the Atomos Shogun 4K recorder comes out, get that, and you can use it with both cameras. So that might be, the best way to go. But that's again, if you have that much money. And if you have that much money, then I would say, I don't know, invite me for an all-inclusive vacation, and we'll go and I'll talk to you all about, this camera, that camera, and any other camera out there. Which actually brings me sort of to my final point. A lot of times people ask me, like especially when they see my work, most common question probably then I get is, what camera did you shoot this video on or this film on? And usually I try to avoid that question, because I know that the second I tell people, that, for example, like this music video I shot it on the Red Epic, and then this one I shot on the Canon 5D or whatever it is, people are gonna think, oh my God, it's amazing, I have to get that camera. And they expect that when they get that camera, that's the kind of image quality they're gonna get. And I'm here to tell you that honestly, the cameras out there are not gonna, especially now, they're not gonna make that much of a difference. A lot of these cameras, just like the Sony A7S, they all sort of have, little advantages here and there, but they also have sort of, deficiencies in certain areas. So you're never going to find a camera that's sort of perfect and has, everything's amazing with it. Even like I said, the Red Epic, a lot of times people wonder why I just simply don't shoot everything on the Red Epic. But when you actually had a chance to work with that camera, you realize that it is a big, heavy camera. It's really tiring to, to work with it for a full day. It uses, it goes through a lot of batteries, and you need those big, expensive, V-mount, or Anton Bauer batteries. It also is going to use up a lot of hard drive space. Also, because of just the size of the camera and the weight of it, you're going to need, better quality Steadicam, or better quality, gimbal, or a jib, all that stuff. So that means, again, your whole support equipment is going to be that much bigger. And also just, then it means that you're working with the camera a little bit slower, because it takes longer to set up that bigger crane or that bigger tripod or Steadicam. And so then, like I said, you're probably going to need a bigger crew, sort of team of people to help you handle the camera, handle all the support, gear. And also the camera is not nowhere near as good in low light as definitely not as the A7S. But even comparing it to the Panasonic GH4, I think the GH4 is even better in low light than the Red Epic. So those are the sort of things to keep in mind. Now, what's great about the Red Epic is that it has amazing resolution. It shoots raw. You have all that extra image information in there. So when you go into post, once you're done editing, you can really sort of push and pull your image. You can also save a lot of shots if you sort of screw it up a little bit with the exposure or things like that. It gives you a lot of sort of latitude there, and it's just overall very nice, sort of clean looking image when it's properly exposed. Again, it's not a low light camera. So that's sort of the thing to keep in mind. And so when you're looking at the final product, if you, for example, handle the Sony A7S or the Panasonic GH4 or the Canon 5D Mark III or the Red Epic, if you handle all those cameras properly, at the end product is going to look very similar, because most of us are still going to finish in 1080p, so you don't really care about having that extra resolution, and you don't really care about having that raw image if you know what you're doing, and you can work well with that 8-bit image that comes out of for example, the Sony A7S. And because of that, like I said, if you know what you're doing with the cameras, and you know what to watch out for, sort of the limitations of each camera, then you can really produce an image that looks very similar, you know, coming out of all these cameras. When you look at that, I'm saying the final graded sort of video. And that's why I'm saying that it's, at the end of the day, the final image is not going to change that much. Yes, one camera might be a little bit sharper here, you know, or might handle the, I don't know, the shadows a little bit better, or this camera might be a little bit better with the water, you know, pattern, like little things like that. But they're definitely not things that an average viewer is going to notice. And it's not something that, like I would say, you know, that's worth spending that much more extra money. Especially when you consider, like I said, the fact that the Red Epic, yeah, it gives you a little more flexibility because it shoots in RAW and a higher resolution. But at the same time, it costs, you know, the full Red Epic really sort of kitted out is going to be over $30,000. Does that mean that, for example, let's say, you know, getting like, I don't know, the GH4, for example, camera, which is going to retail, you know, for almost 1/30th of the price of the Red Epic, does that mean that the Red Epic is 30 times better in the final quality than the GH4? No, it's not. And like I said, when you look at the final, I'm saying, graded image, it definitely is not 30 times better. And so because of that, you really sort of got to be aware of the fact that just you going out there and spending a lot of money on this expensive camera is not going to mean that your final image is going to look good. It really comes down mainly to the skills that you have. So if you're definitely just starting out, I would say even stay away from the, you know, definitely from the Red Epic, but stay away from the GH4, the Sony A7S. Get something really cheap that still will produce decent HD, you know, quality video, like Canon T3i or the Sony, you know, NEX5R, for example. And just learn to use that camera properly. You know, I've shot some really great looking videos on those cameras. So definitely, you know, it can be done. And there's a lot of great examples out there you'll see from, you know, various cinematographers who are really talented. And again, who are not concentrating so much on the camera that they're using, but more on what's in front of the camera, you know, the production design, the locations, the costumes, all that stuff. But then also, for example, you know, like I say, if you have a little bit extra money, spend that money on a better tripod. You know, so many times I've seen people who have, you know, spend money on this great camera and then all their shots are so kind of jerky, you know, or the tripod is like, you know, is a little bit crooked or something. So spend money definitely on a better tripod. Let's say you want to, you know, like add a little production value. Again, instead of you, let's say, spending, you know, another $2,000 or $3,000 or $20,000 on a better camera because you think it's going to make your image that much better, trust me, you're going to be better off spending maybe $1,000 on a really good, for example, Steadicam, or a good, you know, $3,000 maybe on a good 3-axis, you know, camera stabilizer. Because adding that camera movement now, you know, there's really smooth sort of cinematic-looking camera movement, that's actually going to add a lot more production value to your videos than having that slightly better, you know, image quality because you spend all this money on a more expensive camera. Once you've invested in sort of, you know, really good support gear, maybe the next thing you might want to invest in is sort of lights, definitely lenses. You know, like I said, just, you know, what's the use of having a good camera if you don't have good lenses? So invest in some nice lenses, nice, fast, sharp lenses. I'm going to do a review actually in sort of a video talking about sort of lenses that I use with my different cameras and some of those cinema, sort of affordable cinema lenses from Rokinon and Bauer. And those are definitely something that you should consider getting. You know, another thing you might want to invest in is like, for example, some nice filters to use on your lenses, things like that. I think that's going to make more of a difference. But I think the biggest difference it's going to make is really your production design of your video. And I've talked about this before. I've done sort of certain tutorials. Literally my first 3 tutorials that I've ever done on YouTube are talk about that and sort of show you sort of the difference that a production design makes. And that doesn't always mean that you have to spend money on an expensive location, but sometimes just using the location that you have in the right way, or dressing it up, or dressing your actors up, you know, getting the interesting kind of colors going in your image. Those things are really going to make a big difference, because really when you look at, you know, a really beautiful looking films out there, you know, some of them have been shot on these old, you know, film cameras on horrible film stack that produce a lot of noise and don't have anywhere, you know, as much latitude as some of these digital cameras now have. But the reason why these films look so beautiful is because, you know, they actually took the time to build beautiful sets or dress up the locations that they had. You know, especially when you're watching a lot of these period films, you know, the beautiful costumes that they have. Or, you know, watching, like, for example, I love watching some of those old, you know, spaghetti westerns, and, you know, just those nice little sets they have of those little, you know, towns out in the desert. You know, all those little things, those props, you know, just really add a little texture and that nice look to it. And it's also, you know, the same thing when it comes to, for example, like documentary or for example, if you're doing wedding, you know, videos. I'm sure you've seen out there, you know, some wedding videos that just look really beautiful, really stunning, and you know, and then for example, you see that same person who did that wedding video, and let's say, you know, you see another video that they've done, and it just doesn't look anywhere as good, and you might be wondering to yourself, why is it? And you know, they use the same camera, you know, it's the same person, has the same skill set, but really, for example, like let's say if the bride and the groom are not as attractive looking, or not, you know, just not as looking when it comes to their clothing and stuff like that, or if the location that they picked for their wedding, you know, ceremony or for the reception is very sort of dull looking, for example, very dark, you know, just nothing interesting in there to show, then I don't care how good, you know, your skills are. I mean, you're going to be able to, obviously, you know, with better set of skills, sort of make it look, you know, as best as possible, but you're going to be still limited by what that location and what your subjects, you know, your actors are going to, you know, offer you. So that's, again, another thing to sort of, you know, keep in mind. And definitely if you're doing films, you know, number one thing is, you know, aside from the camera and all the things that go in front of it, is the script. And then, you know, so like I said, the actors that you put in front of it. You know, you could have a great script, amazing camera, all this stuff, and I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of these big Hollywood films that you just watch and you can kind of think in the back of your head, you know, who the hell ever thought of making this film? Because it just comes out looking horrible. And a lot of times it's just because, you know, they hire some really bad actors, you know, actors that are just simply very popular at the time or whatever, and, you know, they think are going to help them sell the movie. But, you know, they're just horrible actors, and because of that, the movie looks bad, or like I said, or the script is bad. So again, you know, just throwing money out there into the most expensive camera out there because you think it's going to really put you out there ahead of the game is the wrong strategy to go. So, you know, if you want my advice, I would say first, you know, don't worry too much about the camera, get something decent, and just worry about, you know, definitely your what you're putting in front of the camera, production design, and then, you know, support gear, lenses, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, I hope, you know, my rambling here kind of helped you guys a little bit make up your decision on, you know, whether the Sony A7S or the GH4 or any other outdoor camera is really the camera that you should spend your hard-earned money on. Before I finish up here, I just wanted to leave you guys with a little sort of video collage that I put together of some of these tests that I've been shooting with the Sony A7S in Rome, Italy. Again, it was not a professional project, you know, paid project. Unfortunately, I've been so busy lately, and you know, and just literally did not have time to properly test out this camera, you know, and you know, to really feel confident enough to use this on a paid job. So the test I'm going to show you is just kind of, you know, my own sort of personal, you can say, home video, but it hopefully gives you a little bit sort of an idea of what this camera is capable of. Like I said, I used pretty much the 24mm lens for most of these shots up here, and everything was handheld. So anyways, here's the video. Hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you guys next time.